All praises to Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Rakah. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, and Shalom to the elect to the nation of Israel. This is going to be a lesson on the topic of sin and just answering the question about what sin is. All right, answering the question on what sin is, man. All right, so let's go into it. Because everyone in this world likes to say that we're all sinners, and they like to say things like that. But let's see what sin is. This is 1 John chapter 3 and verse 4. Whosoever committeth sin transgresseth also the law, for sin is a transgression of the law. Right? So a sinner is somebody that's transgressing God's laws, and everyone does technically transgress God's laws, right? But the difference is that God only cares about the Israelites, and therefore the Israelites are the only nation that's been continually punished since that old covenant was made. They're the only nation that's been continually punished for their sinning, right? Every single other nation has actually been rewarded for the Israelites being sinners, and I'm going to explain what I mean by that. This is Deuteronomy chapter 28 and verse 1. And it shall come to pass, if thou shalt hearken diligently unto the voice of Yahweh thy power, to observe and to do all his commandments, which I commanded this day, that Yahweh thy power will set thee on high above all nations of the earth. And the Israelites are not doing that right now, right? And because of them not doing that, that has meant that other nations have been able to make money from the Israelites. And that's the reason why when the Israelites was building the temple for the second time, if I'm not mistaken, why the heathen came and said, if you allow them to build up the temple and to build up their city again, they're not going to pay tax. They're going to be rebellious again. And if you check the records, you'll see that this has been a rebellious nation, right? The reason why they was even saying such things was because they knew that they was getting benefits from us not keeping the God's laws. Because when we wasn't keeping God's laws, they didn't all of a sudden start keeping them. They've never been about God's laws. And let me prove that. This world's never been about God's laws, man. And that's the reason why none of these other kingdoms that rose up after and took over the Israelites ever stayed being a continual kingdom. And now I've said a lot of things, so let me just go to a few scriptures to explain why I'm saying these things. Sirach chapter 10 and verse 8. Because of unrighteous dealings, injuries, and riches got by deceit, the kingdom is translated from one people to another. And none of these other kingdoms that rose up after the kingdom of Solomon, none of them ever kept all of God's laws, right? They was all sinning too. They never decided to do the right thing, none of them. Not one of them decided to ever do the right thing. You see? They all ended up still sinning and going off also. Let me carry on reading. This is 2 Ezra chapter 3. 2 Ezra chapter 3 and I'll start from verse 28. Are their deeds then any better that inhabit Babylon, that they should therefore have the dominion over Zion? Or when, which that's a good question. Like, why is it that these other nations are ruling over the Israelites when their ways that they're living are wicked in comparison? It's not like these other nations are righteous. It's not like they decided to, okay, these Israelites didn't keep God's laws, right? But we've got another way within our nation that's better than the way that they was trying to keep anyway. So we're going to live by that standard. No, these people are wicked. These people are living in an unrighteous way. But the reason why God's punishing us is because God made a covenant with us, and he never made a covenant with any other nation. And let me carry on. Verse 29. For when I came hither and had seen impurities without number, then my soul saw many evildoers in the 13th year, so that my heart failed me, because Ezra was seeing that the other nations are not keeping God's laws, yet for some reason they was above us, right? When we was as a fully established kingdom under the time of King Solomon, his wives caused him to be led astray, right? Then he was told that the kingdom's going to be split. So some of it's going to go to Rehoboam, and some of it's going to go to Jeroboam. And then from that point on, it continued to get split more and more and more, to the point where other nations came and took us away captive. First, it was the Assyrians that took away the northern kingdom tribes. And then it was the Babylonians that took away the southern kingdom tribes. And ever since that point, we've not been a complete nation ever again, man. All the 12 tribes have never been in their land since them points that I just mentioned there. And that's what we're waiting to receive, which is what is equal to 37th chapter. he's talking about. And let me carry on. Verse 30. For I have seen how thou sufferest them sinning. So Yahweh's allowing them other nations to sin. He don't put them under curses for them not sinning. But he's going to, though. And that's according to Deuteronomy the 30th chapter and the 7th verse. For I have seen how thou sufferest them sinning, and hast spared wicked doers, and hast destroyed thy people, and hast preserved thine enemies, and hast not signified it. I do not remember how this way may be left. Are they then of Babylon better than they of Zion? Or is there any people that know of thee beside Israel? Or what generation of soul believe thy covenants as Jacob? And there isn't no other nation that believes in the covenants of Yahweh. None of these other nations believe in it. They're still sinning, man. They still go off. They don't do the right thing, right? Or is there any other people that know of thee beside Israel? Or what generation of soul believe thy covenants as Jacob? And it's only us that believes that we're going to get God's laws put within our mind. Even these Christians that claim to be about the Bible, if you ask them what the new covenant is, you will never see them say what's written in Hebrews the 8th chapter, and you will never see them say what's written in Jeremiah the 31st chapter. And I've tested it several times to see what they will say. On several occasions, when I ask them what the new covenant is, they'll say it's the blood of Christ, right? Which that's not true. Because when it mentions the new covenant in Jeremiah, the 31st chapter, it doesn't mention Yahweh Shai anywhere within that. Within Jeremiah, the 31st chapter and the 31st verse. Let me carry on reading. Verse 33. And yet their reward appeareth not, and their labor have no fruit. For I have gone here and there through the heathen, and I see that they flow in wealth, and think not upon thy commandments. So all these other nations want to always trying to say we're all sinners and all of this stuff, right? Which technically I guess you could say is true. But the difference is these other nations was not punished for their sins because Yahweh didn't have a covenant with them. And let me get a precept for that. This is Amos chapter 3 and verse 1. Hear this word that Yahweh has spoken against you, O children of Israel, against the whole family which I brought from the land of Egypt, saying, you only have I known of all the families of the earth. Therefore I will punish you for all your iniquities. Now let me go to Deuteronomy 28 and 15 as well. Deuteronomy chapter 28 and verse 15. But it shall come to pass, if thou wilt not hearken diligently unto the voice of Yahweh thy power, to observe, to do all his commandments and his statutes, which I commanded this day, that all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee. So that's what's getting ready to happen. A whole bunch of curses. That's what already is happening, right? But that's what's getting ready to happen to the heathen, because they haven't been keeping God's laws, right? And they haven't been having the burden, if I can even use that word. They haven't been having the strictness of keeping God's laws on them. But that's what's getting ready to happen, though, according to Isaiah the 2nd chapter, right? Micah the 4th chapter, and several other places written in the scriptures as well that mentions these things. Now let me carry on. Let me carry on in 2nd Ezra. This is 2nd Ezra chapter 3 and verse 34. Weigh thou therefore our wickedness now in the balance, and there is also that dwell in the world, and so shall they find thy name nowhere. And so shall thy name nowhere be found but in Israel. So if you was to search us as a nation and see how we're living and what we're doing right or wrong, right, you'd see that the only nation that's mentioning about Yahweh's real name are the Israelites. Every other nation is flowing in wickedness, right? And they don't even think about Yahweh's name. They don't think about that. They think about their own ways of living. Verse 35. Or when was it that they which dwell upon the earth have not sinned in thy sight? So all these other nations have always continually been not keeping God's laws. They never kept them, right? But the difference is Yahweh didn't care for them not keeping it, because he never gave the laws unto his ways unto them in the first place. Now let me get some precepts on that. This is Baruch chapter 4 and verse 4. O Israel, happy are we, for the things that are pleasing to God are made known to us. So the things that are pleasing to Yahweh are made known unto the Israelites, but they're not made known unto the heathen nations, right? But they've just always looked at the ways that we live and had a problem with it. They've always said, bow down to this idol, bow down to that. But we never did it. They've always wanted to try and make us follow after their ways, man, but we never wanted to do it. Psalm 147 and verse 19. He showeth his word unto Jacob, his statutes and his judgments unto Israel. He have not dealt so with any nation. As for his judgments, they have not known them. Praise ye Yahweh. So these other nations don't know about Yahweh's way. They're confused as to Yahweh's way, man. They don't understand it. They don't understand the ways of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai. They are still they're still confused according to the ways of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai. Now let me carry on. Psalm 105. This is the book of Psalms 105 and verse 6. O ye seed of Abraham his servant, ye children of Jacob his chosen. He is Yahweh our power. His judgments are in all the earth. He remembered his covenant forever, the word which he commanded to 1,000 generations, which covenant he made with Abraham, and his oath unto Isaac. Verse 10, and confirmed the same unto Jacob for a law, and to Israel for an everlasting covenant. So he gave the laws unto us, man. He never gave the laws unto everybody. You see what I mean? The laws of Yahweh was not given unto everyone, man. But the way how these Christians try and push it is that we're all sinners, that everyone just got God's laws, and that's not true. That's a lie, man. All right? That's a big time lie. It's not for everybody. Now let me carry on. Let me go back into 2nd Esdras. Because everybody likes to just say, oh, we're all sinners, as if that somehow means that they've got a sacrifice for their sins, which I'm going to prove that they don't in a second. This is 2nd Esdras chapter 3 and verse 35 again. Or when was it that they which dwell upon the earth have not sinned in thy sight? Or what people have so kept thy commandments? Thou shalt find that Israel by name have kept thy precepts, but not the heathen. So these heathen nations ain't worrying about God's laws. They ain't worrying about God's ways. And neither have they got a sacrifice for their sins. And let me prove that. This is Acts chapter 5 and verse 29. Then Peter and the other apostles answered and said, we ought to obey God rather than men. The God of our fathers raised up Yahweh Shai, whom ye slew and hanged on a tree. Him hath Yahweh exalted with his right hand to be a prince and a savior, for to give repentance to Israel and forgiveness of sins. So the only nation that Yahweh had a covenant with in the first place, for starters, is the Israelites. The only nation that he said, if you do the laws, I'm going to give you a blessing. If you don't do the laws, I'm going to give you a curse, was the Israelites. The only nation that was sent a sacrifice for their sins, for their wickedness that they was doing, was the Israelites, because they was the only nation that had a covenant with the Israelites in the first place. So Yahweh hid his face from the sins of the heathen, and he allowed the world to be wicked under the heathen because the Israelites did not do the right things. Right? But in the end, he's going to take them out and give us the kingdom again. And let me prove that. Sirach chapter 10 and verse 4. The power of the earth is in the hand of Yahweh, and in due time he will set over it one that is profitable. And that one that he's going to set over it that's profitable is our Lord Yahweh Shai. Now let me get another scripture on how the only people that Yahweh Shai was sent to die for was the Israelites. This is Hebrews chapter 9 and verse 13. In fact, Hebrews chapter 9 and verse, I'll go 11. Well, Hamashiach, being common high priest of good things to come, by a greater and more perfect tabernacle, not made with hands, that is to say, not of this building, neither by the blood of goats and calves, but by his own blood, he entered in once into the holy place, have obtained eternal redemption for us. For if the blood of bulls and of goats and of the ashes of an heifer, sprinkling the unclean, sanctifieth to the purifying of the flesh, how much more shall the blood of Hamashiach, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without spot to God, purge your conscience from dead works to serve the living power? And for this cause is the media of the New Testament, that by means of death, for the redemption of the transgressions that were under the First Testament. Now, who is that First Testament with? Now, I've actually heard somebody say before that the first covenant was with everyone, and that there was heathens there. That's stupid, man. It doesn't even say that in no Bible verse. That's a lie, man. There's not one Bible verse out there that you can find that says that. But as always with Christians, they're prepared to lie in order to try and make salvation somehow be for them. They're just prepared to lie. But them lying doesn't make it true. And if you don't like the truth, you shouldn't even pick up the Bible, man. If you don't like the truth, if you're allergic to the truth, you ain't got no business picking up a Bible and putting it in your hand and saying anything to do with it, man. Because the Bible is a book of truth. Sanctify him with the truth. Thy word is truth. Verse 15 again. And for this cause he's the mediator of the New Testament, that by means of death, for the redemption of the transgressions that were under the first testament, they which are called might receive the promise of eternal inheritance. And that's not for everybody. The people that was under the first testament were the Israelites. The reason why Yahushua came to die was for the Israelites, because he came to die for those that were sinning under the first testament. He came to die for those that God made a covenant with. God never made a covenant with the heathen. In fact, it was written within the covenant that the heathen was going to be used to punish us if we didn't keep the covenant, if we broke some of the rules of the covenant, which the rules of the covenant was to not sin. And that leads me back to the verse that I started off this lesson with, right? Which I believe already. Let me read it again if I didn't. 1 John chapter 3 and verse 4. Whosoever committeth sin transgresseth also the law, for sin is the transgression of the law. So when you're sinning, you're transgressing Yahweh's laws, but the only nation that was given a covenant with Yahweh in the first place, to where their sins was going to be watched over, and their sins were going to be punished with curses or blessings, punished with curses and rewarded with blessings, was the Israelites. He never made a covenant with no other nations, man. He didn't do that. And that's why when he makes the change to the old, when he made the change to the old covenant, the change that he made for the new covenant was that he was going to change us. And I'll say that again. That's why when he made the changes to the new covenant that was separate from the old covenant, the change that he made was that he was going to change us. Hebrews chapter 8 and verse 7. For if that first covenant had been faultless, then should no place have been sought for a second. So if there wasn't no problem with the first covenant, right, we'd just still be under the new covenant. The old covenant. The Bible wouldn't be separated into the Old Testament and the New Testament. It wouldn't have been no need for that to be done. Verse 7. For if that first covenant had been faultless, then should no place have been sought for the second. For finding fault with them, he saith, Behold, the days come, saith Yahweh, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day when I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt, because they continued not in my covenant and I regarded them not, saith the Lord. For this is the covenant that I make with the house of Israel after those days, saith the Lord. I'll put my laws into their mind and write them in their hearts, and I will be to them a God, and they shall be to me a people. So where is it mentioned of a nation in that? Where's there an Edomite in that? Where's an Ishmaelite in that? Where's a Moabite in that? And the thing is, they'll try and say that they're in it, but when you look at how they're living, they don't like God's laws anyway. They'll say, yeah, it's for everyone actually. Nah, where does it say? That's talking about a spiritual Israel, but when you look at their life, they don't want to keep it anyway, man. They're always making excuses. If you tell an Ishmaelite, don't eat camel, they'll say, why? Why though? They say, I only eat it sometimes. I only eat it I only eat it fortnightly. Or I only eat it monthly. Or they'll say, I don't eat it, but some people do. Well, no one's supposed to. If you say to a Christian, you're not supposed to eat pork, they'll say, oh, but that was in Acts. No, it clearly says in Leviticus 11th chapter in the 7th verse, don't eat pork. So just don't do it. Now, some sins are harder. Some laws are harder to follow than others. But the thing with a Christian is they don't want to follow none of them. They don't want to follow none of God's laws. They want to just be able to live whatever way they deem fit. That's what they want to be able to do. They want to just be able to do whatever it is that they want to do and then still get the blessings, which is ridiculous. They want to just be able to be like, I'm going to live whatever way it is that I want to live, and you better accept me. That's how they think, man. That's how their wicked minds have caused them to think. But Yahweh's not accepting of that, man. They can say that all they want, but Yahweh's don't believe that. Yahweh's not accepting of that. And let me carry on verse 11. And they shall not teach every man his neighbor and every man his brother, saying, Know the Lord. For all shall know me from the least to the greatest. For I will be merciful to their unrighteousness, and their sins and their iniquities will I remember no more. Meaning that Yahweh is going to forgive the sins, every single sin that an Israelite ever committed under the first covenant. He's going to be forgiven one day. Because Yahweh is going to punish the Israelites for all the wickedness that they've done anyway. Let me prove that. No, it's either Jeremiah 16 or Jeremiah 9. I think it's Jeremiah 16. This is Jeremiah chapter 16. Wow. This is Jeremiah chapter 16 and verse 19. Jeremiah chapter 16 and verse 19. 1 second. Let me just highlight these so it's easy to find in the future. Jeremiah chapter 16 and verse 19. O Yahweh, my strength and my fortress, and my refuge in the day of affliction, the Gentiles shall come unto thee from the ends of the earth, and shall say, Surely our fathers have inherited lies, vanity, and things wherein there is no profit. Shall a man make gods unto himself, and they are no gods? And that's what the Israelites are getting ready to say, man. Those Gentile Israelites that were scattered in all these other nations, that's what they're getting ready to say, man. Right? Verse 21. Therefore, behold, I will this once cause them to know. I will cause them to know mine hand and my might, and they shall know that my name is Yahweh. So he's obviously talking about a time in the end days, because it's not talking about times with nothing to do with Babylon and all that, because Yahweh is still punishing the Israelites, even still now to this day. But after the day of the Lord's wrath, right, he's not going to punish them no more. And therefore, every single sin that they ever committed, which is the point I'm making, every single sin that they ever committed, he's going to be completely forgiven, man. But we're going to still remember all the wickedness that we did and understand Yahweh's true mercy, man. Which, now that I said that, let me just show that the Israelites are the vessel of mercy, right? Romans chapter 9 and verse 22. No, Romans chapter 9 and verse 23, in fact. And that he might make known the riches of his glory. Let me go up a bit. Verse 22. Why, if God, willing to show his wrath and to make his power known, endured with much long suffering the vessels of wrath fitted to destruction, and that he might make known the riches of his glory on the vessels of mercy, which he had afore prepared unto glory. And that's talking about the Israelites, man. So all these people that are saying that things are for everybody don't know what they're talking about. All these people that are saying that we're all sinners, well, fine, you can run with that. But you wasn't under a covenant with God, though. You wasn't under a covenant with God. And Yahweh never required for the heathen to keep the laws. He never said to them, if you keep the laws, I'm going to make you on the top nation on all earth. Because he couldn't have made a covenant like that. He couldn't have said it to the Israelites and then also said it to the Edomites. That wouldn't have made no sense. There can only be one top nation. And that's going to be the Israelites when we get changed. Right? Once we get brought under our new covenant with Yahweh. Once we get brought under that new contract with our Father that's in heaven. Hallowed be our Father's name. His kingdom come, which is our kingdom, that we're going to be sharers of. His will be done, which his will is to bring us into the kingdom, not you heathens. On earth as it is in heaven. And he's going to forgive us our debts, as we're to forgive our debtors, which is another Israelite that's committed transgression against us. And he's going to lead us not into temptation, man. Not you heathens. And on that note there, I think I'll end the lesson. This was just a video about the word sin and what sin is, and showing that the Israelites are the only nation that sins was ever a problem in the eyes of Yahweh, because he always knew that these other nations were fools. All praises to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem Rakar Kwadash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, and Shalom to all of the elected nation of Israel. Shalom.